Welcome to the first episode of the Jet Series NFL podcast. My name is DJ Demerit, and I am joined by my co-host, Tyler Smith, a.k.a. Smitty, and Ian O'Malley. How we doing today, fellas?
What's going on? Big news out of Philly today.
Most definitely, Smitty. As we know, Carson Wentz just got traded today to the Indianapolis Colts for a couple of picks. We got a third rounder and a second rounder in that deal. That second rounder is a conditional second rounder where, if the Colts make the playoffs, that second rounder becomes a first rounder in Philly. So obviously the Eagles are going to be big fans of the Colts this year. And I know today we're going to discuss kind of what went wrong in Philly and how Carson Wentz ended up where he is.
Absolutely. We know a lot of things have happened in Philly this offseason, essentially also losing coach Doug Peterson. Walk us through the trade. So what happened? What was going on in Philly? What were some of the issues they were having? And why is this a good thing for Indianapolis?
Well, it's a good thing for Indianapolis because they had a hole at quarterback, and Carson Wentz is young enough that he could fill that hole for a long time. They've had a revolving door at that position since Andrew Luck retired unexpectedly. And they had Jacoby Brissett for a year, but really he's a backup guy.
And some call him
Jake Brisket, as you call him, but where he can come in, play well for a few weeks, but you probably don't want him over the course of an entire season. Then they brought in Phil Rivers, but we knew that was a one-year deal anyway. He only signed a one-year contract, but we knew he was going to retire after the season anyway, because he was getting up there in age. And look, they had a good year. They went 11-5, went to the playoffs, almost won their first playoff game against the Bills. And who knows what they would have done after that. But then Phillip retired. And now they had a hole, and really because Indy has a roster capable of getting to and winning a Super Bowl, I think, and a lot of other people think. So, getting a quarterback that can come in and play right away was really important for them because when you bring in a young quarterback and you draft a rookie, you don't really know how he's going to adjust to the NFL. So you might have needed Brissett to start anyway. Well, obviously they don't want him to start, as I said, for the reasons I explained earlier. So they were down to Carson Wentz. Sam Darnold is out there. Mitchell Trubisky, who, that's not a guy I would want if I'm trying to win a Super Bowl.
No, he hasn't proved anything since his Pro Bowl either.
He hasn't proved that. No, he hasn't. And Deshaun Watson just wasn't available for them because Houston wouldn't trade him within the division. So, Carson Wentz is really the best of those options because he has the best track record of the three. And very important to point out, he had his best season in Philly with Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator. Frank Reich is the head coach in Indianapolis.
Right.
And since Frank left, Wentz has not been the same quarterback. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, as I'm sure we're going to discuss with some of the things that have gone wrong in Philly. But I think he really lost his rock in the organization in Frank Reich, and now he's going to be back with Frank with a good offensive line in front of him, a good stable of running backs, a couple of good receivers at tight end, and then their defense is top 10.
Yep.
So if you have a quarterback that can play at an MVP level, which Wentz did, although it was 4 years ago now, he still has done it. If he can get back to that, Indy should definitely be in the Super Bowl mix.
Should definitely be in the conversation, right? And we look at that division, we kind of pick it apart. You have Tennessee, who's been strong the last 2 years, right? You have Houston, who is not in good shape, especially with what's going on with Deshaun Watson. We'll get into that later. As you said, they couldn't get that trade from in division anyway. You look at Jacksonville, which you have a whole mess of problems in there. Obviously, that we're going to try to see what they do in the offseason with that draft pick and Trevor Lawrence potentially. And, we'll get in that as we move closer to April. But this is Indy's push. And like you said, with Frank Reich being there, now Carson has a safety blanket. Let's see if he can play at the level he was playing at years ago. Obviously, in Philly, we saw a few different things happen, though, right? Because the playbook was dumbed down when Nick Foles got in the game, when Jalen Hurts got in the game. They were expecting almost too much of Carson Wentz, which we saw over the past couple of years. And I think he was just a disastrous situation, couldn't do a whole lot, couldn't play to his full potential, didn't have a backfield, arguably, for the last couple of years in Philly. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in Indianapolis. I'm excited for him. I think they can make a playoff push and can be in the Super Bowl mix, as you mentioned. But it's going to take a lot.
Yeah, it will.
No, go ahead, Ian. No, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, I mean, like I said, with Indy having all the good things about them, then you go back to all the problems in Philly. I mean, yeah, the running game was hit and miss there. I mean, Miles Sanders was good. Boston Scott, their change of pace back, only seemed to play well against the Giants. And then, by the way, last year, due to all the injuries, they had the worst offensive line in the league. Yep. And so you have an organization where the general manager is too close to the owner, because 3 coaches that with winning records have all gotten fired since Howie Roseman's been the general manager. Andy Reid over the last 2 years been the best coach in the league. Chip Kelly won the division and won 10 games in back-to-back seasons, and then got fired after one bad year. And then Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Now, granted, with Doug Peterson, they got worse each of the 3 years after that.
Yeah, because he was still riding that wave. I think it was pretty evident.
And he was riding that wave, and that's one of the things you see with teams that only win once. One of the reasons why teams only win one Super Bowl is because with Philly, that was an emotional wave that they rode through the entire season. Highly emotional teams, they can get hot for 1 year and ride that wave the entire year to win a Super Bowl and beat a team that otherwise they wouldn't beat. But it only works that 1 year. We saw it in college football at LSU 2019 to 2020, and then the Seahawks ever since they won their Super Bowl. That you never recapture that feeling. And then when you actually have to do things systematically, unemotionally, they never really recover. But going back to Wentz, I think he also hurt himself in Philly, because once Foles got in and played well and won the Super Bowl, the fan base gravitated towards Foles. And when Wentz got back in the lineup, there were certain plays Philly wanted to run that Wentz said, no, that's a Foles play. And he didn't want to run Foles plays. He wanted to run Wentz's plays. And so he went from a guy that would play by the design play and then play off schedule when he had to a guy that only would play off schedule. And it led to him having the bad year that he had and the overall unraveling of that organization.
Right. And we saw it too with Jim Schwartz taking a year off from football as well. That's pretty much everything you need to know about what was happening in Philly. And he definitely didn't make it easier on himself.
Well, you look at Wentz. He comes back after Foles has already, led the Eagles to a couple wins. Wentz comes back, he doesn't perform. And then this year he gets benched for Hurts, and then he gets the opportunity to play again, and he doesn't perform. So I think the best thing for Wentz is for him to go to Indy. He gets to reunite with the coach that developed him and invested in him, and Wentz was able to perform well with him as the OC. And now you're the Eagles, and you finally get over this drama that you've caused with Wentz. You've been the most talked about league besides, the Texans with the way they're handling, they handled the J.J. Watt situation a little differently than most teams would. They're handling the Watson situation awfully. So, Wentz has a chance to resurrect his career, and I think this is the best opportunity for him to play like the number 2 overall pick should play. And, he gets reunited with Frank Wright, and I think it's a win for both. It's a win for the Colts. It's a win for the Eagles, but not the Eagles. It's a win for Wentz, not a win for the Eagles, because they decreased his value so much. They're only getting a 3rd-round pick this year, which, third round pick, and you get a 2nd-round pick next year that could turn into a 1st-round pick. But my expectations is for Wentz to absolutely excel with the Colts, and I think it's a win-win for the Colts and Wentz. And I think the Eagles shot themselves in the foot. They weren't allowed to get the 1st-round pick they probably should have got for him. Whether it was just 1 1st-round pick, I don't think they should have got 2 for him. But I don't think a late 1st-round pick is crazy for the Eagles to get for Wentz. But they get a 3rd-round pick now, and then they get a 2nd-round pick. I think if you're the Eagles, you put this drama behind you, you move forward with Jalen Hurts. I think the team responded very well to Jalen Hurts when he played. I think the team was a little more motivated with him. And to be quite honest with you, I think the mistake was firing Doug Peterson in favor of Carson Wentz. I think he should have said we're gonna keep Doug, and we're gonna move on from Wentz, and we're gonna let Doug develop Jalen Hurts the way he thinks he should be developed. And I really think that would have made the difference.
See, I actually would have cleaned house if I was Philly. The one guy I would have wanted to possibly keep would have been Wentz, and I would have gotten rid of Doug and Howie Roseman, because they, like I said, they've gotten worse every year since the Super Bowl. Other than Wentz, they haven't drafted a Pro Bowler. All right. They got cap problems, and they're old. You know, I mean, the offensive line is old and broken down. The defensive line is probably still the best in the league, but they're getting up there. And then they don't have any skill players offensively. And how in 2021, I mean, they have Miles Sanders pretty good. Zach Ertz is kind of like the defensive line and the offensive line. They're getting up there.
But I don't expect Zach Ertz to be on the team next year. I don't expect them to 100% trade him, and if they can't trade him, they will 100% release him and just roll with Dallas Goedert, which should be the plan.
That's a viable number one tight end in most offenses across the league. I absolutely agree with that. Getting back to Carson Wentz for a second, right? And I know we all had a conversation a couple weeks back when we were talking about the rumors of Carson Wentz and where he might end up and what he was worth. And I said, I don't think he's worth the first-round pick. And I seem like an idiot in the moment, but now you see he valued his worth over the last couple of weeks. I think the Eagles Foundation did a great job of doing that for him, and they didn't luck out on the back end there either. The issue I'm seeing now is compared to Deshaun Watson, who, if he is on the table, and we'll get into that later, he's going to be worth a plethora, if not 1, 2, potentially 3 first-round picks, or however that deal gets stricken up. Second is you're looking at Matt Stafford, who went for first-round pick. Now Carson Wentz's value is so below what it should have been when the season was still happening, when trade rumors were first picking up. Now Philly did not luck out in that situation whatsoever. Now you got to look at it at the back end too. We're talking about Deshaun Watson. We're talking about Tua. We're talking about Jalen Hurts. So now you look at quarterbacks being offered and going for big market numbers. Jalen Hurts got to be a little pissed off right now. He has to be. He has to have a chip on his shoulder. This is the guy that they chose to roll with over Carson Wentz. He's coming in. He looked okay this season for what it's worth. And you got to remember, too, he was replaced by Tua at Alabama. I think he has a lot to prove. I think the Eagles roll with him. I am really curious to see what they do with that number 6 overall pick in this year's draft.
I will say any talk that a QB will be used for this number 6 pick, I don't see that happening. I don't see you rolling with Hurts as a backup for, he proved that he should be on the field and he proved that he can play. So I think you use this number 6 pick and you go fill a position that you absolutely need. One being wide receiver. They took Jalen Reagor last year. I believe it was number 23rd overall, but they took him over Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson has proved that he's a lot better than Jalen Reagor, and I think Jalen Reagor was very disappointing this year. They drafted J.J. Arcega-Whiteside the year before. He has not lived up to the talent that they drafted him for. You got Alshon Jeffrey, who can never stay healthy. Deshaun Jackson, who can't stay healthy. I think you use that number 6 pick, and I think you go get a guy like Devonta Smith if he's there. Jamar Chase if he's there. Maybe Jalen Waddle. Or you say, hey, we're really not in the QB market. You trade back and you give the number 6 pick to a team that is very QB needy, and you trade back, acquire more picks, and you're able to acquire more talent to surround Jalen Hurts with, because that's what you should be focusing on. If you're gonna roll with Jalen Hurts, you should get the talent around him. And with the cap situation that they're in, they're not going to be in the free agency market. So you really should. This is a big movement for the Eagles, and they should acquire as many draft picks as they can, so they can fill the holes that they need, because they have many needs that they need to fill, including on the defensive side. They need defensive back help, linebacker help, interior D-line help. They need help all around the board. So you got to utilize. You need to utilize all your picks, and if you have the opportunity to trade back, if I'm the Eagles, I wouldn't even think twice about it. I would trade back, especially if you're not going to draft a quarterback. But if you're going to draft a quarterback and try to develop him, I don't see how Howie Roseman keeps his job. if he drafts a QB number 6. I don't see it happening. He botched it on Wentz, and he's got something good in Jalen Hurts. But if Jalen Hurts ends up being a bust, then I don't see how he can continue being a GM for the Eagles.
No, I agree with you on that. Like I said, he should have been fired already, I think. But, so here's the question the Eagles have to ask. Is he the starter moving forward, or does he profile more as a backup? The answer to that, or do they just not know? So the answer to that question should determine what their draft strategy will be, which is if they think he's a franchise quarterback, then you trade back and you acquire more players. If you think he's a backup, you draft a quarterback at 6. Or if you don't know, then what I think they should do is you draft the best player available. Because like we said, they have a lot of needs. I mean, we don't need to go through them all. I think the biggest need is offensive line. I know Penei Sewell is the best offensive lineman in this draft, the left tackle out of Oregon. He probably won't get past the Bengals at 5, but the Bengals could even trade back because they believe they have their quarterback of the future in Joe Burrow, which would be a smart thing to do because, again, similar to Philly, they need players. So the answer to what they think about Jalen Hurts should determine how they attack this draft.
So you're pretty much going to see what their decision is come April based on who they draft. You're going to know what they think about their quarterback room. And I think you made a great point in the best guy available. I think this is a very similar situation to not a quarterback play and not teamness wise to what the Giants did when they drafted Saquon at number 2. Very similar. You got to take the best guy on the board, even though it's a QB favorited draft to some extent where you got, 4 guys that can really play and 1 guy who might be able to play. I think they take the best guy on the board. And that's where you'll know Jalen Hurts is the starter in Philly, which I think he should be. He didn't do anything to lose that job. He just traded Wentz, who you were a huge fan of for a few years on end. You got to play him. Don't draft the quarterback.
He didn't do anything to lose the job, but it kind of seemed like down the stretch that the Eagles responded well to Jalen Hurts, being kind of in charge, and it just seemed like the team responded him to being QB1 a little better than they would have responded to Wentz. And I know a lot of players came out and said that their support is behind Wentz and stuff, but I think as soon as Wentz got benched for Hurts, there was no secret that the Eagles had to move on. But I don't think the Eagles handled it the way they should have handled it. They fired their head coach in favor of their QB that they're about to trade, 3 months later. I think Howie Roseman is 100% at fault at this. And, Howie Roseman got the Eagles into the cap situation that they're in now. They paid way over market for Alshon Jeffrey, who hasn't done anything but be on their IR every year. They invested in the offensive line, which helped out, but now you got to replace Jason Peters this year, who's a free agent. They tried to help out the defense by investing in guys like Sidney Jones, who was one of the top cornerbacks coming out of college out of Washington. He hasn't lived up to his second-round hype. And there's just so many holes on the defense that, with $51 million in negative $51 million in cap space, I just don't see how you're able to build a championship team out of that. Like I don't know. I just don't know.
You don't. It's almost like you're in an impromptu right now, right? Where you're starting from scratch. You're starting with Jalen Hurts, and you're saying, "This is our franchise. This is what we're looking to build over the course of the next few years." And you said you better acquire some draft picks if you don't draft a quarterback first, at 6 overall. I'm sorry, in this draft. Correct me if I'm wrong. Just to go back to Jalen Hurts for a second. So he won a national championship at Alabama, right? And then he followed Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray at Oklahoma. Had a pretty good year that year leading up to the draft. Why shy away from him? Why not give him the keys to the kingdom and say, this is what we're going to surround you with? Like you said, we need O-line. We need pretty much everywhere needs help on the defensive side of the ball. And we need somebody in the backfield that he can trust that they can. What if you see something like you did in Oklahoma too, where you see a lot of, you see a lot of quarterback movement. You want to see him going. What does a new era of quarterbacks look like? You see Lamar Jackson, you see Kyler Murray, you see guys moving their feet. They're mobile. They're dual threats to some extent at the NFL level, right? I think that's a great base for Philly to start their quote-unquote rebuild. Surround him with talent, go out and try to compete in that division that's suffering.
Well, so here's the thing with Jalen Hurts, because he hasn't – it's similar to how he was at Alabama, because he didn't do anything to lose his job at Alabama. There was just somebody behind him that was better. So, my question with Jalen Hurts has always been, what is his actual high-end potential? Like, he's a great kid. He's a great guy. He's a great young man. He's exactly, as a coach, what I want a player to be in terms of character. My question is, if you give the keys to Jalen Hurts, are you expecting a Super Bowl in the next 3 years?
No, well, I don't think anybody in that division, no offense to the NFC East, is expecting a Super Bowl
in just the way it is.
The next 3 years, because you're looking at 6-10 being a playoff record. You need someone to break that mold, whether it's Philadelphia. I don't think it will be. I think, as we talked about recently, it could be Dallas. It could be New York. I mean, Washington put up a good playoff picture this year as far as getting into it and competing a little bit against Tampa Bay in that wild card round. I don't see them winning a Super Bowl. I don't see them going to the Super Bowl in the next 3 years, and I don't even see them going to the playoffs in the next year or two. I think 3 years is when they actually make an impact, but it really depends what they do leading up to it. Depends on what they do with this pick from Indy. Depends how they draft this year. It depends what they do with that number 6 overall pick. And it depends on if Jalen Hurts even stays healthy. It's also a question. It's a question is, do you put all your eggs in the Jalen Hurts basket? If he gets hurt, what's your evacuation route? Where do you go from there? You're playing in a conference.
The Eagles have 4 top 100 picks this year, going into the draft. If they trade Zach Ertz, they might be able to get another one. But if you're really that concerned about the QB position, you have opportunities where you can say, hey, we necessarily don't need a QB with the 6th pick. Maybe we trade back into the latter half of the first round, acquire some more picks, and then maybe we go get a guy that's that might have fell or that's sitting here. But you can use one of your 3rd round picks for a QB. The first pick, your 6th overall pick, if you're going to stay there and pick there, you have to pick someone that can come in right away, that can contribute, whether it's on the defensive side or the offensive side of the ball. They got Miles Sanders. He should be okay. They got Jalen Reagor. They'll give him another shot this year, being a 1st-round pick going into his 2nd year. He'll have opportunity. This is probably J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's last year to prove himself. And if he doesn't get it done this year, they're probably going to move on from him. So if I'm at number 6, I get what Ian was saying. I get the best player available, and I say, hey, you're coming in here. You're going to contribute from day one, and let's build a championship team. But I do agree. I don't think they're going to get anywhere remotely close to the playoffs this year. If I'm betting on the NFC East, I am 100% putting all my money on the Washington Redskins. I think they are only, the football team.
It's hard. It's a hard adjustment.
It is. I think if they can get some good QB play, they have some weapons in Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas. There's some guys out there that they can get. They have enough salary cap space. They can go out and get a guy that can contribute on offense, but they got a good defense with Chase Young. They got a young defense. Possibly, in 3 years from now, they might have the best front 7 in the league. So, I think Washington needs to find their QB, and I just think the Eagles need to fill more holes before they can get into even considerably into the playoff hunt.
O'Malley looks like he has something to say, but just real quick, you also got to remember a healthy Dak in Dallas could change some things as far as the playoff picture is concerned as well. But go ahead.
And stick.
But you gotta. I don't mean to cut you off again, Ian, but you gotta look at their contract situation. They're gonna tag Dak for the 2nd year in a row.
At what, 35 or is
38?
38 this year.
So they gotta tag Dak, and when you tag Dak, you're gonna get hit with a pretty hefty charge. And if I'm Jerry Jones, you just got to either pay this man or just move on from him. You can't be going year from year by tagging your QB. when you have noticeably big needs on the defensive side of the ball. Like you got DeMarcus Lawrence you can build around, but you got some offensive skill players. You know, you got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, you got Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, you got plenty of guys that you should be able to throw the ball to, but it's their defense that is in such question, which struggled all year.
Yeah, I mean, and you talked about DeMarcus Lawrence, he's actually one of the question marks because ever since they paid him, he has not lived up to the contract. You know, one of the things that Dallas has done is they've paid B players A contracts, and they've actually gotten less than B returns from those contracts. I mean, Jalen Smith he's not bad, but he's not what he was in 2018. DeMarcus Lawrence definitely hasn't been what he was in 2017, 2018. I mean, look, in terms of Dak, and I know we're talking about mostly Philly today, but in terms of Dak, you know, Jerry Jones is 78 years old. It's not a lock that they're going to re-sign him, but they're going to re-sign him because he doesn't want to go into his 80s trying to start over with another quarterback, even though Dallas really should be in a rebuild with where their roster is. And I think Philly should definitely be in a rebuild where the Giants and Washington have been. And don't forget about the Giants in the NFC East, because I feel like them and Washington are kind of in the same position where Dallas and Philly have been better than those two teams. And now they're kind of falling back, and they should be going into rebuilds that they don't really want to. Whereas the Giants and Washington have been rebuilding, and now the two of them can kind of see light at the end of the tunnel. As a Giants fan, I believe that my favorite team has their coach of the future. Daniel Jones, I'm not sold on, but it's pretty much this year. I've seen things in the first 2 years that can lead me to believe that this year could be a breakout year for him. Plus, you got to, you know, with Saquon coming back, they're going to look, there's 4 elite receivers in this draft. There's Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, and Jalen Waddle. The Giants have to get one of the 4.
One of those guys.
They're picking 11th. So it could be tough, but they got to get one of the 4. So going back to Philly, I think it's hard to say who's going to win the division. But right now, if I had to pick who's going to finish in last, I would say it's easily them. Just because there's things with the other 3 that, I mean, even with Philly having the best D-line in the league, they're another year older. So who knows how good they're going to play, especially they're probably not going to have a lot of leads because their offense is going to be bad, most likely. At least with Washington, they get a young team that with mostly bad quarterback play last year won the division. The Giants, I mean, they beat Washington twice and had 3 games where they had Dallas, Philly, and Tampa on the ropes and should have won those games.
And they beat Seattle.
And they beat Seattle. And then you have Dallas, who was number 3 in the league in offense when Dak went out, and you're going to get Dak back.
Right.
So any one of those 3 teams, I could see a legitimate case of them winning the division, whereas Philly, I just don't see it.
I don't either. I don't see them being a threat to that division. It's a lot of complacency. I think, like we said, they're in a rebuild without, even if they don't want to be, they're going to be in a rebuild. Now, your goal is to go out there and to compete, get Jalen Hurts a little bit more seasoned, and hopefully draft somebody, like we said, that can contribute right away. But you don't expect to go 500. I think if you're in Philadelphia, if you're Howie Roseman, you don't. I think I'm not going to put money on it or make a bet over this podcast, but what are the chances Howie Roseman gets fired during the season next year?
High if Jalen Hurts doesn't work out.
Especially if he doesn't use this number 6 pick correctly. I think he will 100% be on the hot seat. No question.
Well, I think he's on the warm seat right now. I think he's already in the warm seat.
Definitely. The fan base doesn't respond to him. The fan base is questioning what the hell he's doing with all these moves. And you know, he's definitely somebody who is on the warmer seat leading up to the 2022 season. If out of any GM, he's got to be the number 1 person on the hot seat. I mean, I can't name another GM that's on a bigger hot seat than he is right now.
Dave Gettleman's close.
Yep.
Yeah, Dave Gettleman might be close, definitely.
Dave Gettleman's close because Giant fans are not happy with him, even by what their standards have been the last few years, a good season. When he and John Mara had their end of the year press conference, they were they seemed a lot happier than what most teams do coming off a 6-10 season. And now I understand the optimism because I think it was more future optimism than anything else. But they seemed a little too happy for the season they came off of, because for half the season, they were the worst team in the NFC. Going back to Howie Roseman, if once it becomes apparent, and I'm not saying this will, but once it becomes apparent Jalen Hurts is not the franchise quarterback, that's when the clock really starts on Howie getting fired. Because at some point, Philly has to prove to the rest of the league that they can they can maintain positive relationships with quarterbacks. Now, if you look at the teams that win, New England, Belichick and Brady, although it wasn't a warm and fuzzy relationship, they did have a great working relationship for, 20 seasons.
Right.
Mahomes and Andy Reid. Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson did have a good relationship at one point, but now
we'll be getting into that on future episodes.
And we'll be getting into that. Now it's a little icy. Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, until Championship Sunday, that was looking great. And when the last few years with Mike McCarthy, that relationship was not good. Mike McCarthy got fired, and Aaron Rodgers all of a sudden just had the best year of his career again when it looked like he was on the decline.
Right.
So that relationship is very important. They completely burned the bridge between Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. And who even knows if that was Doug's fault? I mean, Doug doesn't look good in it, but as it turns out, Howie Roseman has all the power in the building. And then they benched Jalen Hurts, and that had to have been a Howie Roseman decision because, in the game against Washington, that had to have been a Howie Roseman decision because you only make that decision if you're looking for a better draft pick. Right. Well, that matters more to the GM than it does to the head coach.
Trying to win a football game.
Then, right, we're as a coach, I'm trying to win a game.
If you lose that game, New York doesn't go to the playoffs, who's essentially your bigger rival in that
yes.
division.
Yes.
So that there's a lot of scrutiny there. I do think that was more of a GM decision as well. Again, we don't know.
No, we don't. And look, I mean, I have two friends that are Eagle fans, both people that I have coached football with previously, some of the best coaches that I've coached with, and they're not happy with what's going on in Philly. I haven't talked to them about Carson Wentz yet, but they're not happy. But they already were not happy with Doug Peterson getting fired. And not so much because they like Doug, but just because they don't like the way the team has played since the Super Bowl. It's like all of the bad karma that they had to go through in the years they weren't winning Super Bowls, because Philly wasn't bad before. They usually weren't bad before they won the Super Bowl. They had usually been right on the cusp and then just not
gotten there,
knocking the door down. But 2017, they knocked all the doors down at once, and they're kind of paying for it ever since. And so, who knows what's going to happen coming up in Philadelphia?
Knows, but let's something to say, somebody get something to add?
I mean, you should have rolled with Doug Peterson for one more year. He's coming off a Super Bowl win 2-3 years later, but he still brought you a Super Bowl title, which many teams in the past are not even sniffing. They're not even sniffing the Super Bowl contention. So you fire this guy, and you're the GM that still keeps his job. But you look at this whole cap situation. Who's responsible for the cap? The coach or the GM? It's the GM. Maybe the coach has some say into it. But where the Eagles are today, I 100% blame Howie Roseman and his contracts, because he paid Alshon Jeffrey, who that has to be one of the worst contracts for a wide receiver I've seen in a long time. Absolutely botched that contract. He pays all these guys, and now he's in $51 million in debt in the Eagles, and now he clears up about $19 million with the Carson Wentz trade, but
which is huge. That does help.
It is huge, but you still have to restructure so many contracts. You have to release veteran guys that are probably, the better players of this team. There's really the young players for the Eagles, you can't really think of any young players who are really, excelling for the Eagles. Hopefully
Miles
Jalen Hurts
Sanders
is the
and Dallas
guy, but
Goedert.
Miles Sanders, absolutely. Yep, that's two. Defensively, you can't think of anybody. They got Fletcher Cox, who's a veteran, but he could be a cap. He could get cut this year. He's getting older.
Brandon
They're paying him
Graham.
a lot of money. So,
Brandon
the
Graham.
Eagles, they are definitely in a 100% rebuild. And like I said earlier, I don't see them touching the playoffs anytime soon, no matter what they do with the 6th pick.
All right. So we've covered pretty much everything Philadelphia so far. You guys want to get into J.J. Watt, a friend who was just released by another team in the AFC South that is not named the Colts.
I think if we're talking where he's going to land, I think he'll ultimately land with the Browns. Or those are the two that he's really eyeing on. I think the idea of playing with his brothers is intriguing, but I think the idea of going to play with the Browns is just as intriguing. You look at that front four, you got Myles Garrett over there. Myles Garrett, J.J. Watt. That's a pretty solid duo of defensive ends. Their defense came along very well last year, especially down the stretch. And, they are a team that if they can land J.J. Watt and they can fill a couple more pieces, I think they're absolutely a team that can play with the Chiefs and contend for the AFC.
Yeah, plus you got OV there in the D-line, and I don't know how that's going to work out because he got injured going into the playoffs. And, they might have to clear some cap space to bring J.J. Watt in. But if you're able to have Myles Garrett, J.J. Watt, and OV, that would be a really good triumvirate of defensive ends, although who knows if OV would want to be there at that point because he'd probably be a backup.
See, OV's a free agent, and they have over
$24
million in space. So you let OV go, you bring in J.J. Watt. I can't see a team paying more than 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 mil for J.J. Watt, but I don't think he goes any more than that, and I don't think he signs anything more than a 1-year deal. I think if he's going to go chase a championship, it has to be this year, or
that was my next question.
That's
Do you think he's chasing a ring right now? Or do you think he just wants to be in a new environment with a chance to win? What do you think what's going through his head?
Well, don't forget about this too. Is he also going to go chase the money?
Right.
And that has to, and look, for every person in every profession, that has to be something you think about. It just has to be. So the kind of guy that J.J. Watt is, I would think he would go chase a ring. And I think the best place to do it is Green Bay. I don't know if because Green Bay is not historically a high-spending team in free agency, and they definitely don't get into bidding wars. They'll pay a guy if no one else is going after him. Like nobody was really going after Zadarius Smith a couple of years ago, or Preston Smith, or Billy Turner and guys like that, or even Charles Woodson back in 2006. They were the only team that offered him a contract. And they were the only team that was smart enough to do it because Charles Woodson put together a Hall of Fame career, half of that in Green Bay. And probably his best years were in Green Bay in terms of production. But I think Green Bay is the best place to do it because, one, I think Green Bay had home field advantage in the playoffs last year. You look at a team with cap space, which I think Green Bay has because they're not a very big spending team. And then plus you look at, because Kansas City is probably viewed as the best team going into the next season, but Kansas City is going to have cap space issues.
Right.
Whereas the Green Bay, they're not. You're going to have leads because Aaron Rodgers is your quarterback. They're a very good team, could have won the Super Bowl last year. In fact, had they gotten there, they probably would have won it. And, the thing is with J.J. Watt, the bulk, maybe not the bulk, but a lot of his contract is probably going to be incentive-laden. And the incentives are probably going to be sacks because he's not the player he once was, and he's chasing a ring. So guys like that usually don't take big base salary contracts. They usually take incentive-laden contracts.
Guaranteed money will probably be a higher percentage as well.
Well, yeah, right. But his guaranteed money will be a lower percentage compared to other free agents this year, just because he's trying to get a ring, and guys that go ring chasing usually take lower guaranteed money and more incentives because they're on good teams where those incentives can be reached, especially for a pass rusher, where if you're going to have leads a lot, he's going to have opportunities to pin his ears back, go back and get sacks.
Right.
Versus if he was going to go to a team that's maybe not as good, where he might have a lead, he might not. I think Cleveland is a good choice for him. I think the next best choice for him is after Green Bay is Buffalo.
I do agree with that.
Similar situation in Green Bay. You're going to have the lead. The two reasons why I picked Green Bay over Buffalo. One, he's from Wisconsin, and he'd have the chance to go home. Two, Green Bay has a better history of winning than Buffalo does.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Buffalo just got good in the last few years, and Josh Allen just got this good. Let's see if they can sustain that. I think they will, but who knows?
I think they will still win that division.
Yes.
Again, you're looking for a long-term longevity, looking for Historia, and as far as that's concerned, Green Bay makes more sense in that regard, for sure.
You know, speaking of the Packers, the Browns, the Bills, another team that I could see landing J.J. Watt is Seattle. You know, Seattle had the offensive power to make a run in the Super Bowl or to a Super Bowl, and what killed them the most was their defense. The defense struggled all year. You know, it came alive a little bit towards the end, but, you know, two of their top free agents, outside linebacker KJ Wright, defensive end Bruce Irvin, both pass rushers, both all-time Seattle pass rushers who, you know, won championships with them. You know, they've been around a long time. I think Seattle's a team that would definitely use J.J. Watt, and I think they're a team that would pay J.J. Watt. They got a little over $14 million cap space, and they got a couple other positions that they could focus on, most notably the offensive line, you know, with Russell Wilson coming out and publicly making it known that he's not happy with the offensive line. He's not happy with being sacked all the time, being hit to the ground. So, you know, if I'm Seattle, you got to focus on the offensive line, but you're not going to win if you can't improve this defense. And they've taken first-round, you know, draft talent in most recent years, most notably L.J. Collier, who they drafted in the late first round a few years ago, has not played anywhere near his potential. I wouldn't even be surprised if he was on the roster next year. So they need to improve that defense, and they also need to improve that offensive line. But I think if they can land a guy like J.J. Watt, you know, I think that helps them out tremendously. And
landing J.J. Watt would be an overall plus more than the production they'd get from J.J. Watt would be more than from Bruce Irvin and K.J. Wright combined. So you lose two to gain that one, that makes your team better. You know, with Seattle, I mean, because Seattle's a good spot for them, but you just never know what Seattle's plan is. I know they're in a Super Bowl window, but like in the draft, you just never know what direction they're going to go in. And that's why they draft these guys like L.J. Collier and Rashad Penny that you just kind of scratch your head at. You know, with J.J. Watt possibly, because one of the big ones that's been talked about is going to Pittsburgh to play with his brothers. I just don't know why you'd want to go to Pittsburgh right now. I mean, their window is pretty much closed. Last year, they were the weakest 11-0 team that anybody had ever seen. They finished the season as a bad team, losing 5 of their last 6 games. Pretty much they played one great half against Indianapolis in the second half, and, you know, in the last 6 games of the year, and that was it. They started the playoff game horrendously, about as bad as I've ever seen a team start a playoff game.
We don't know who their quarterback's going to be.
We don't know, right? We don't know who their quarterback's going to be, and if their quarterback's really engaged. Their receiving core, well, pretty athletic, is not very sure-handed. They dropped a ton of passes late in the season.
Not to mention Juju is a free agent, so we don't know what we're going to do with him.
Offensive line, they can't run block. They can't run the ball. I mean, you know, offensive line, which had always been a strength of the Steelers, is now it's not a strength of the Steelers, and Marquise Pouncey just retired, so that made it even worse. So, you know, yeah, it would be fun to go play with your brothers in Pittsburgh for a year, but I'd rather do that after I win a Super Bowl.
Right.
That way I know I win a Super Bowl.
Get the 1 or 2 year deal with a team that has a chance at winning in the next year or two, and then either go get your money, which you probably won't get at that point in time, or go play with your brothers.
Right, because J.J. Watt still has years to play. I mean,
I think so.
I mean, he's still probably a top 10 defensive lineman in the league.
Without question. Without question.
He's not the best anymore, but he's still a top 10 player at his position. And because he's ring chasing, you know he'll take a contract on the cheap. That's why I'm saying Green Bay is the perfect spot. and then you win a Super Bowl in Green Bay. Not saying that it'd be a lock that if he goes to Green Bay, they win, because you can't guarantee a Super Bowl or a championship in any sport. But I think his best chance would be there. Then you win a Super Bowl there, and then you go finish out your career playing with your brothers in Pittsburgh. Heck, you could take a 2-year deal in Green Bay or Buffalo, and then go finish your career in Pittsburgh. Just
one more year,
because he's still got game left. You know what I mean? He's not playing out the string. He still can play and be your top player on a defensive line.
I agree completely, but there's two things that before we dive into this any further and for weeks to come until something does happen, is one, can he stay healthy? It's going to be a huge question with the team at hand. And two, it's we have to figure out, does he want to win a Super Bowl or does he want to get paid? I know based on who J.J. Watt is as a player, we think he wants to win a Super Bowl. It's the reverse. What team's going to offer him the best contract, the most?
Bad teams, because they always do. It would be a team like the Jags.
Bad teams will definitely offer him the best contracts.
Yeah, it's ironic because the teams that are usually the most active in free agency are the teams that usually don't win on the field because they spend cap space on players that don't deserve it. Now, J.J. Watt, again, you have to understand if you pay J.J. Watt, you're paying him to be – because J.J. Watt can be your top player in a defensive line. But again, one of the benefits of him going to Green Bay is that if he gets injured and is out for a few weeks, it doesn't cripple the team. Because, one, they still got that offense with Aaron Rodgers, which was number 1 in the league last year. Plus, you still got the Smith brothers and Rashawn Gary and Kenny Clark on that front with Jair Alexander in the back end. So even defensively, you still will be a top half of the league defense, even if J.J. Watt goes down for a few weeks. Whereas if you're a bad team and let's say he's looking for the money, Jacksonville is the most cap space, and the Jets have the second most cap space.
Yeah, and we're going to see.
They were also the 2 worst teams in the league. If one of those 2 teams pays him, and that doesn't seem like the kind of player that the Jet. I mean, because the Jets, it doesn't seem like the kind of player those 2 teams are looking for, just because they're in full rebuilds. Where not that J.J. Watt can't help you, but just their timelines don't match. The kind of free agent those guys are looking for are older players that maybe have already won a ring, maybe they haven't, but guys that are good locker room guys, good veteran guys. We would call those guys at the places we've coached, which the 3 of us together is just 1, but for me, we would call those guys program guys. You bring them in, they're not going to get a ton of playing time, but they're always going to do the right thing. You can always trust them, and then you throw them a bone.
They benefit the culture. That's the biggest thing. Like you said, locker room guys. They benefit the overall culture. So the guys that are coming up into that environment are going to play with that mentality and have that, sort of virtuous characters to an extent in that for years to come. I think J.J. Watt would do a great job of not putting that past him whatsoever. But it's, do you want to go be on a losing team for the quote unquote end of your career? And I don't see that happening.
No, I don't think he would. He's made over $100 million with the Texans. I really don't think money's that big of a deal for him. I think he wants to go out and chase a ring, and I believe that's what his mindset is. But if he wants to go do that, let's talk about a team that has some need at pass rusher that might not be able to bring all those guys back, and it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at a team like that. They're losing Shaquille Barrett. They're most likely not going to be able to resign Shaquille Barrett. He wants to go out. He wants to get the money. He came out and publicly said, this is probably the year that he'll get paid the most in free agency. So you look at that. You want to ring with Brady. What more could you ask for? Why not go out? You might want to come back and try to rerun it with them, but why not go out and chase your money? This is probably the year that you can go out and get the maximized value of your current contract. You look at a guy like Levante David as an outside linebacker. He's on a expiring contract. Bruce Arians said he'd like to bring him back, but Levante David will probably want to command some high-end money, It's all good to win a ring, but these guys want to get paid. Ndamukong Suh, he's an unrestricted free agent. Steve McClendon's an unrestricted free agent. Tampa Bay Buccaneers have so many holes they need to fill on the front 7 of the defense, and they're not going to be able to bring all these guys back. So if I'm the Bucs, how much would you pay Shaquille Barrett a year? He's probably going to command somewhere in the high teens a year, maybe 19, 18, 17 mil a year. and then you can substitute him for a guy like J.J. Watt, who might command $7 million a year, $8 million a year. Or you can even lower the guaranteed money and just make it all incentive based and say, hey, you want to get paid? You want to chase a ring? Well, you got to perform. So
I'm with you on that. When I forget, I forget who it was who came out with the report of possible landing destinations for J.J. Watt. They had Tampa Bay number 4th in that list, which I didn't originally agree with. Where you're coming from, I understand. I don't know if he takes a pay cut down to $7 million a year, J.J. Watt. I think the player he is, the hype around him, and what he's produced over the last few years, there's no arguing he's one of, if not, he's not the most valuable, but he's one of the most valuable edge rushers in defensive line in general in the league. There's no questions asked there. Like you said, if you can substitute Barrett for J.J. Watt and load up that incentive based on his contract, that might be a spot for them. Tampa did have the best front seven in the league this past year, and they do it again. And I think that's what they need to answer. If you're looking for a second ring, that's going to be one of the main contributors right there.
See, they're not going to be able to do it unless they ask all these guys to take pay cuts, which I don't think a lot of offensively, maybe Godwin will take a pay cut and say, hey, I'll take a smaller deal, or he'll get franchise tagged, which,
possibility still.
Because that's the thing, because Godwin's a free agent. You have, and all the guys you mentioned.
Gronk's a free agent. Antonio Brown's a free agent.
And by the way, Gronk said he could be looking to play elsewhere. Now, I don't know why Gronk would leave Brady to go play with another quarterback, because it's not going to be as good for him as it is playing with Brady. So so Gronk should probably stay in Tampa. And Ndamukong Suh said he would take less money to come back because he wants to win. Shaq Barrett's going to go get paid, as he should, because this is probably the last, as you said, this is probably the last time in his career he could get a big contract. Levante David's already 30, so it's probably the same thing with him.
Right.
And plus, he's not even. I mean, I can make the argument he's not even the best inside linebacker in his own team. Devin White is their Mike linebacker. He can go somewhere, be somebody's Mike, go get some money, and he's already won a ring, so
there's nothing to lose really in that regard.
So he's got nothing to lose. He probably, just from a business standpoint and from a career standpoint, he probably should go get paid at this point. Steve McClendon's going to go because they have Vita Vea there, and they were playing Rakeem Nunez-Roches over Steve McClendon anyway, so why is he going to go be the third nose tackle on the team? I mean, that's worse than being like the third string quarterback at this point in football. So, yeah, I mean, they're probably not going to have the best front seven in the league again. I mean, going to get J.J. Watt would help, and J.J. Watt's a better player than Shaq Barrett probably. So you probably have an upgrade if you get J.J. Watt over Shaq Barrett, but then you lose Levante David most likely. So, it might not be the best, but it would still be towards the top of the league in terms of front sevens. And then Chris Godwin, yeah, I mean, if you bring back Chris Godwin, you're definitely not bringing back AB. And then who knows with Gronk. But again, with Gronk, you're getting O.J. Howard back. So,
see, I think they'll choose. I'm thinking they're going to choose Gronk over O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard hasn't lived to the first round pick that they acquired him at. So I could see them possibly moving on from him, keeping Gronk. Gronk will take a pay cut, I'm sure, if he can stay with Brady. Brate's coming back. I think some of these AB, he's been paid throughout his career. He's had a ton of guaranteed money. I could see him taking a pay cut to come back and play with Brady and go chase back to back. Something that the last person to do it was Brady with New England. So I think those two guys will come back. I can even see Godwin coming back. They tag him. It's a $16 million charge. He can get paid more than that on the open market, but will he do that? I don't know. I don't know if he do. I think he'd rather play with Brady for one more year under the franchise tag. And if Brady decides to go a separate way, then he's like, all right, I'll go get paid somewhere else. But, defensively, I see them having a hard time keeping that group intact. But offensively, I see no problem with them being able to retain those core guys, who really helped them in the Super Bowl. I see them letting Fournette walk. Fournette will go get paid somewhere else. Not a big contract, but he'll command $7-8 million on the open market. They got Ronald Jones. They drafted someone last year. So I think offensively they'll be able to keep it intact, but defensively, I think you really need to, make your money count and say, all right, let's bring in a JJ Watt guy and we let, a Levante David walk. We'll be paying Levante David more than we'd be paying JJ Watt.
Okay, so we do think there is a possibility JJ Watt does land in Tampa. All right, just to kind of circle back to the JJ Watt, where he might end up. So we've heard Green Bay today, we've heard Cleveland, we've heard Tampa. Where else on this list of JJ Watt predictions?
I think that's basically it in terms of teams that have a chance to win because, like we talked about, it's either he's going to decide to go win or he's going to decide to take the money. And he asked for his release from Houston. You know what I mean? So that kind of leads us to believe that he's trying to win. Because
Right.
if he just wanted to get paid, he could have stayed in Houston. Although Houston was probably going to release him anyway because they didn't owe him any more guaranteed money. So he's probably just looking to win. And so you look at Green Bay, Buffalo, Tampa, Cleveland, Seattle. Pittsburgh's a possibility because his brothers are there. Kansas City, I don't think is a possibility because of cap space. Yeah, I think that's basically it because then, who else is really in that Super Bowl window? The Saints have to cut people because they have the worst cap situation in the league. And then
you don't even know what their quarterback room is going to look like next year.
Right. You don't know what their quarterback room is going to look like. And then you got possibly Indy could have creeped into that mix today because of the Wentz trade, but they're going to pay Wentz a lot of money. Here's one other team out there that we got to watch out, that we got to look at with JJ Watt. In the same division, Tennessee. Now you look at Tennessee, offensively, I think they were fourth in the league. They were third. I think they were third in points. And they were first in their division. Derrick Henry's best back in the league. Ryan Tannehill, the last year and a half, has been one of the better quarterbacks in the league. Defensively, they had arguably the worst pass rush, and their secondary wasn't good either. So you look at J.J. Watt in Tennessee, they've been looking for a pass rusher last year. They went out and signed Jadeveon Clowney right before the season started, and he didn't really pan out. And they've drafted pass rushers and signed other pass rushers in free agency that just haven't worked out. So you had a J.J. Watt in Tennessee. How much better are they? The one question I have about Tennessee is, have we already seen the best of Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill?
That brings up a good point. Again, not to answer around your question, but it's a very interesting situation that now that he's not being traded from Houston, the in-division threat, he's a free agent. That could be a very interesting landing destination for JJ Watt, where you're playing Houston twice a year. You go into a team that has proved themselves offensively. I don't think we've seen the last of Derrick Henry. I think he's still going to be a 1,000-yard plus rusher next year. He's going to be a 2,000-yard back. I don't know.
Well, that's what I mean when that's what I mean when I say have we seen the best of Derrick Henry. I still believe he'll be a 1,000-yard back coming up, but the 2,000, we've seen his peak.
We may have seen his peak, and I still think he's a top 10 back in the league next year.
Yes,
for sure, hands down. But we may have seen his peak already. So you guys have anything else to add on the JJ Watt possible landing destination?
No, I think we've discussed all the teams that he's going to end up for. My closing thoughts, I think he's going to go chase a ring. I think he really, really wanted to bring a ring back to Houston, but I think his front office didn't allow him to. So I think he'll be going out ring hunting, and I really don't think money's that big of a deal for him. He's going to go chase a championship with whoever that is, whoever it is. I think it'll eventually be the Browns, who can very well make themselves a championship contender. But, we'll have to see.
Yeah, and I second that, Smitty, in terms of him going to chase the ring. The one question I have about the Browns is that, do the Browns even trust Baker long term? I think that's why I think Green Bay, there's almost no, it's so perfect that it's almost not going to happen because it's such a perfect fit. Whereas with the Browns, one, they just got good. They had their first playoff season in 18 years. And then two, Are they committing to Baker long term? But I think philosophically, you and I are on the same page that he's chasing a ring. That the money is not his primary goal.
And I agree with both of those statements. I think we are going to see him make a decision based on chasing a ring and not getting paid. It'll be interesting to see it all unfold. I can't wait to cover this when it does in fact happen. I think we are out of time today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the first episode of the Jet Series podcast. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.